The ground in California is collapsing, not in a sudden, violent earthquake, but in a slow, silent, relentless descent. An area the size of a small state is deflating like a leaky mattress, and it's dragging the engine of American agriculture down with it. The record was set in 1977. Near the town of Mendota, a scientist named Joseph Poland stood beside a utility pole. High above his head, a sign marked where the ground used to be in 1925. 28 feet higher. The earth had fallen by the height of a 3-story building. That was the historical watermark. The impossible event. Today, it's happening faster. In some places, the ground is dropping 2 feet every single year. Not a crack, not a fissure. The entire landscape is sinking. A vast bowl is forming in the heart of the world's most productive farmland, and the multi-billion-dollar concrete arteries that keep it alive, the aqueducts and canals that carry water hundreds of miles by the force of gravity alone, are breaking apart. They are being swallowed by the very ground they were built to nourish. Before we go any further, the sheer scale of this is hard to grasp. So we have one question for you. What do you think is the biggest unseen threat to our infrastructure? Let us know in the comments. It helps us understand what stories matter. Let's begin. This is a story about what happens when water doesn't flow uphill. Because in the San Joaquin Valley, that is no longer a law of physics. It is a daily, multi-billion-dollar engineering problem. A shocking number of people who watch our documentaries are not subscribed. If you value this kind of deep dive, independent storytelling, please take 1 second to hit that subscribe button now. It is the single most important way to ensure we can keep making these. It matters more than you know. California's Central Valley was never meant to be a garden. It is an arid to semi-arid basin that engineers, over the course of a century, transformed into the most productive agricultural region in human history. They did it with a colossal circulatory system of dams, reservoirs, and canals. Artificial rivers made of concrete, designed with microscopic precision to carry snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada mountains south, coasting on a gentle, perfectly calculated slope. The entire system works on one principle: gravity. The Friant-Kern Canal is one of its main arteries. Completed in 1951, it runs 152 miles from Millerton Lake down to the Kern River in Bakersfield. It was engineered to carry 5,000 cubic feet of water per second, a torrent of life for 1 million acres of farmland. For decades it worked. The water flowed, the crops grew. The valley boomed. Then the ground beneath it started to vanish. During droughts, when the state cuts surface water deliveries, farmers have only one option for survival. They drill wells. They punch thousands of feet into the earth and pump water from ancient, deep aquifers. Those aquifers are made of sand, gravel, and critically, thick layers of clay. As the water is pulled out, the clay layers compress under the weight of the land above. They collapse, and unlike a sponge, they do not reinflate when the water comes back. The compaction is permanent. Inelastic, the ground above sinks, and it never rises again. This process is called subsidence, and it has crippled the Friant-Kern Canal. By the early 2000s, engineers at the Friant Water Authority, the agency that operates the canal, were watching their flow rates plummet. The concrete river wasn't flowing, it was pooling. Along a 33-mile stretch in the middle of the canal, the ground had sunk so profoundly that it created a bowl, a dip in the perfectly graded channel. The water would flow in, and then it would stop. Trapped, because water cannot climb the other side of a depression it was never designed to encounter. The canal that was built to move 5,000 cubic feet per second could barely manage 1/750, a 60% loss of capacity. Gone, farmers who were supposed to receive water saw their deliveries cut by anywhere from 100,000 to 300,000 acre-feet annually. That's enough water to supply a city of over 1 million people for a year. It just sat there, stuck in a concrete puddle in the middle of the valley, while the crops it was meant for withered a few dozen miles downstream. The situation was untenable, a term used by William Croyle, the former director of California's Department of Water Resources, after seeing NASA's data on the sinking. Something had to be done. A life-sustaining piece of federal infrastructure was broken. The plan was straightforward. The scale was obscene. Engineers would rip out the sunken portions of the canal and rebuild them higher. They would essentially regrade the broken section of the river, pouring new concrete walls to contain the flow and force it over the sunken landscape. Phase 1 targeted the worst 10 miles. The cost was $326 million, paid for by a mix of federal funds, state grants, and the water users themselves. Construction was a monumental effort. For years, crews worked to demolish the old cracked concrete and erect a new, taller channel. It was a brute force solution to a geophysical nightmare. In June of 2024, the politicians and water managers gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Carl Stock, the regional director for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which owns the canal, gave a speech. Today's ribbon-cutting celebration, he announced, is a shining example of what can happen when federal, state, and local agencies partner together in pursuit of future water security. It was a good line. It was also tragically, demonstrably false. Because as he spoke, the ground beneath the brand new $326 million stretch of concrete was already sinking. The partnership he celebrated was already falling apart. The very problem they had just spent $250 million to fix was re-emerging before the dedication plaques were even mounted. This is the central, maddening paradox of the Central Valley. The farmers desperate for the canal water are the same people pumping the groundwater that is breaking the canal. To survive today's drought, they are pumping with such intensity that they are destroying the very infrastructure that guarantees their survival tomorrow. It's a doom loop made of concrete and desperation. The moment the ribbon was cut on the Friant-Kern repair project, it was already a failure. Data showed the new section, which was built to restore about 1,000 cubic feet per second of flow, was actively sinking at a rate of roughly 1 foot per year. That immediate sinking erased 250 CFs of the newly gained capacity. Instantly, a quarter of the entire project's benefit vanished. The $326 million solution was losing its effectiveness with every gallon of water pumped from the ground nearby. What does a 60% failure in a piece of critical infrastructure like this even look like to you? It's a number so large, it's hard to contextualize. Drop your thoughts below. This reality has ignited a firestorm of legal battles. The Friant Water Authority, now led by CEO Johnny Amaral, is suing the local groundwater agencies. In court filings, they accuse these agencies of gross negligence, of failing to implement California's 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or ESHGMA. ESHGMA was supposed to be the landmark law that forced local areas to balance their groundwater budgets, but its deadlines are generous, with full compliance not required until 2040. The canal, however, is failing right now. In a February 2024 court document, Amaral's predecessor showed the canal had sunk an additional 1.8 feet just since a 2021 legal settlement was reached. They are suing for $95 million in damages. But how do you put a price on a collapsing system? The lawsuits are a desperate attempt to force action, to make someone, anyone, stop the pumping that is eating the canal alive. But the farmers in those groundwater districts argue they have no choice. When the canal fails to deliver their surface water, the wells are all they have. They are trapped in a cycle where their only means of survival is also the instrument of their own long-term destruction. If this story was just about one 152-mile canal serving 1 million acres of farmland, it would be a regional agricultural disaster, a costly, complex, and frustrating one. But it's not just about the Friant-Kern Canal. What's happening there is a preview, a test case for a much larger, much more catastrophic failure happening just a few miles to the west. A failure that threatens the water supply for 27 million people. If this story is as shocking to you as it was to us, please hit the like button and consider sharing it with your family. This isn't just a California problem, it's a blueprint for what happens when we push natural systems too far. The California Aqueduct is the spine of the state, a 444-mile-long concrete river, the main artery of the state water project. It carries water from the Sierra Nevada foothills all the way to the sprawling cities of Southern California. Los Angeles, San Diego, 27 million people drink, shower, and live off the water this aqueduct delivers. Like the Friant-Kern, it is a gravity-fed system, a masterwork of hydraulic engineering dependent on a precise, gentle slope. And it is breaking. The same subsidence that crippled the Friant-Kern Canal is now buckling the California Aqueduct. The ground beneath it is sinking in massive bowls, some stretching for dozens of miles. In certain sections, the aqueduct has lost over 20% of its flow capacity. In the most damaged stretches near the town of Lost Hills, capacity is restricted by as much as 44%. The concrete is cracking under the strain. Bridges that were built to cross over it now sit too low, their support columns threatened by the subsiding channel, forcing costly retrofits. The Department of Water Resources, the state agency that runs the aqueduct, is staring at an impossible bill. The estimated cost to repair the damage, to raise the sides of the aqueduct and fix the cracked concrete and sinking bridges, is somewhere between $3 and $3.9 billion. Billion with a B. That's not a plan to build something new. That is the price to fix what is already broken. A repair bill for damage that is still actively getting worse every single day. To put that number in perspective, the entire original state water project, one of the largest public works projects in history, cost about $1.75 billion in the 1960s. Adjusted for inflation, that's around $17 billion today. California is now facing a repair bill that is more than 20% of the inflation-adjusted cost of the entire original system. Just to patch up the parts being swallowed by the earth. This isn't a farmer's problem anymore. This is a state-level crisis. The water that keeps the fifth largest economy on the planet running flows through this single, fracturing channel. The stability of Southern California's water supply is directly tied to the stability of ground hundreds of miles away. Ground that is proving to be anything but stable. So where is the epicenter of all this? What does it look like, on the ground, to live in a place that is literally sinking? You go to Corcoran. Corcoran is a farming town of about 22,000 people in Kings County. It sits on the bed of the old Tulare Lake, a once vast freshwater lake that was drained a century ago to create farmland. The soil here is soft, fine-grained, and deeply susceptible to compaction. Corcoran has become world famous among hydrologists for one reason. It is sinking faster than almost any other place on the planet. Between 2007 and 2021, the entire town of Corcoran sank 11.5 feet. In some localized spots, the drop has been even more severe. During the peak of the 2015-2016 drought, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory used satellite radar to measure the land. Their findings were stunning. A huge subsidence bowl centered just outside Corcoran and another near the town of Chowchilla was sinking at a rate of 2 feet per year. You cannot see it with the naked eye. Life goes on. It's not like a Florida sinkhole that swallows a house overnight. This is a slow regional deflation. The clues are subtle until they are not. Foundations crack, roads undulate, and most surreally, the town becomes a hole. Corcoran is protected from flooding by a levee. In 2017, the town had to spend $14 million to raise that levee, not because climate change was making floods higher, but because the entire town was sinking below the surrounding floodplain. The floodwaters stayed at the same level, the city was dropping into them. It's a paradox so bizarre it sounds like science fiction. Rebuilding a wall to protect yourself from a danger that isn't rising, but from a ground that is falling away beneath your feet. The local prison, the California State Prison, Corcoran, has faced millions in repairs for damaged buildings and infrastructure. The local water district has had to repeatedly raise its wellheads as the ground sinks around them, leaving the metal pipes protruding further and further from the earth, like markers of a buried city. Michelle Sneed, a hydrologist who spent 25 years with the U.S. Geological Survey, has been one of the lead scientists tracking this phenomenon. Her work, alongside others at the USGS, definitively linked the 2 feet per year sinking rates directly to the explosion in groundwater pumping during California's increasingly intense droughts. The satellite data from NASA's JPL, using a technique called INSAR, provided the irrefutable evidence. From space, you could watch the ground breathe. It would rise slightly in wet years when pumping eased, then plummet dramatically in dry years when the wells switched on. But with each cycle, the net result was a permanent loss of elevation. The land never recovered what it lost. The ground around Corcoran is a preview of the valley's future. It's a place where the consequences of a century of water management decisions are no longer abstract. They are measured in feet and inches. They are written in cracked concrete and billion-dollar repair bills. And they reveal a fundamental, terrifying truth. You cannot uncrush the earth. In November of 2024, a team of researchers from Stanford University, led by Matthew Lees and Dr. Rosemary Knight, published a study that put the scale of the damage into shocking new perspective. Using years of satellite data, they looked at the period from 2006 to 2022, a time frame that included some of the most intense droughts in California's recorded history. What they found was that the San Joaquin Valley had been sinking at record-breaking average rates. Never before has it been so rapid for such a long period of time, Lee stated. But the most staggering number was not about the rate of sinking, it was about the volume, the total amount of physical space, of land elevation that had been permanently lost. 14 cubic kilometers. That is the volume of land that has vanished from the valley floor. It's a number so large, it's almost meaningless. So let's try to give it scale. 14 cubic kilometers is more than 3 times the volume of Lake Tahoe. It is enough rock and soil to bury the entire city of San Francisco under 370 feet of earth. This is not water that has been drained. This is the physical structure of the planet that has been compacted and erased from the landscape. Forever, this is the core of the problem. The one that no amount of concrete can fix. When the clay layers in the deep aquifers collapse, it is a one-way street. No amount of rain, no atmospheric river, no record-breaking snowpack can reinflate them. The storage capacity of the aquifer itself is permanently diminished. The ground will never rise back up. Every inch of subsidence is a permanent wound on the landscape, a debt paid by the physical structure of the state itself that can never be repaid. This is why fixing the canals is so maddeningly difficult. Engineers are pouring concrete onto a foundation that is actively and permanently disappearing. They are patching a crack in a wall that is being lowered into the ground year after year. I know we've asked before, but the numbers don't lie. A shocking number of you are still watching right now, but haven't subscribed. If you've made it this far into the story, you clearly find this kind of reporting valuable. Please, just take that 1 second. It makes a world of difference for our channel. All right, lecture over. For now. The political and legal systems are struggling to cope with a problem moving at the speed of geology, not legislation. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014 was supposed to be the great hope. For the first time, California law required local agencies to develop plans to bring their groundwater basins into balance, to stop taking out more water than goes back in. A simple, logical idea. But the law gave them 20 years to do it. The deadline for sustainability isn't until 2040. The Aqueduct, however, is losing 44% of its capacity now. The Friant-Kern Canal is seeing its multi-million-dollar fixes fail now. The town of Corcoran is sinking into a floodplain now. The legal framework is moving at a bureaucratic pace, while the physical crisis is accelerating. This lag time is at the heart of the lawsuits flying between the Friant Water Authority and the groundwater agencies. The canal operators are saying, your pumping is destroying our federal infrastructure, and your legally mandated sustainability plan is too little, too late. The groundwater agencies, representing thousands of individual farmers, retort that they are following the law as written and have no other water to keep their multi-billion-dollar agricultural operations alive. The crisis has pitted neighbor against neighbor, water district against water district. Everyone is acting rationally to ensure their own survival, and in the process, they are collectively driving the entire system toward a cliff. The leadership at the Friant Water Authority has become a revolving door of crisis managers. Jason Phillips, the former CEO, navigated the monumental task of securing funding and building the Phase 1 repair, all while fighting a losing battle against the relentless sinking. He stepped down in late 2025, handing the reins to Johnny Amaral, the former COO who had been deep in the trenches of the legal fight. Amaral inherited a partially repaired canal that was still broken and a legal war with no end in sight. He is managing not just a piece of infrastructure, but a slow-motion catastrophe with no clear solution. The problem is that for a century, California treated its groundwater as an infinite bank account. In dry years, you made a withdrawal. In wet years, nature made a deposit. But no one was tracking the balance. No one understood that the bank itself, the physical structure of the aquifer, was shrinking with every major withdrawal. Now, the bill for a century of overdrafts has come due, and it's a bill that can't be paid with money alone. It has to be paid with water that doesn't exist, and with land that has already vanished. So what comes next? The engineering solutions get more desperate and more expensive. There are already plans for Phase 2 of the Friant-Kern Canal fix, another stretch of concrete to be ripped up and rebuilt at an even greater cost. For the California Aqueduct, the $9 billion price tag is just a preliminary estimate. Actually securing that funding and executing a repair across dozens of miles of active aqueduct will be a political and logistical challenge on a scale rarely seen. And all of it, every dollar spent, every yard of concrete poured, is a gamble that the rate of sinking will slow, a gamble that SG-EMA will eventually work, a gamble that they can pour concrete faster than the earth can sink beneath it. Right now, it's a gamble they are losing. There's a deeper, more unsettling layer to this. The historical context. The Central Valley Project and the State Water Project were born from an era of profound confidence, an American belief that any landscape could be engineered to suit human needs. We would move rivers, build the world's tallest dams, and make the desert bloom. For a time, it seemed to work. An agricultural empire was built on that confidence. But the scientists of that era did not have satellite radar. They did not have the deep monitoring wells that Joseph Poland and the USCs later installed. They saw the surface, the water, the immediate results. They did not see the slow-motion collapse happening thousands of feet below. We are now living in the consequences of that partial vision. The subsidence crisis is the long-delayed environmental impact report for the 20th century. The story of the San Joaquin Valley is not a cautionary tale. Not yet. It is the story of a system caught between an impossible past and an unsustainable future. It is a slow, quiet crisis that lacks the visual drama of a hurricane or a wildfire, but carries consequences just as profound. The ground is just deflating. Silently, invisibly, unstoppably. What's happening in California is a hyper-local problem with global implications. This one valley produces a quarter of the United States' food, including 40% of its fruits and nuts. Its stability is not a parochial concern. When the aqueducts that water that food supply begin to fail, the ripples are felt in grocery stores across the country. The final, chilling reality is this. The fight is not against failing concrete or flawed water laws. The fight is against physics, the weight of a continent pressing down on collapsing clay layers, the unyielding force of gravity on water in a channel that is no longer level. The engineering is brilliant. The money is staggering. The effort is immense. But it may not be enough. The valley is paying a debt to geology that has been accumulating for 100 years. The ground beneath California is falling, and it's taking one of the modern world's greatest engineering achievements down with it.